We've made it to chapter 6 and 7 of our Four Agreements book study. I'm so excited that we have gotten to this point because what these two chapters are really helping us with is how we do this and giving us a little bit of motivation to do it. Now, if you're new here and missed the first few, I will put a link to the playlist where we cover each of the other chapters so that you can get a more in-depth understanding of what it's like to actually work through the Four Agreements. So let's start with chapter 6. Chapter 6 is all about understanding what freedom really is. And what freedom really is the ability to be authentically you, to act the way that you want to and the way that you were meant to when you came here. It's about being yourself. Now, that sounds all great and wonderful, but then you go, okay, but how do I get to that point? And that's what he covers in the rest of the chapter. There's three basic concepts here that he talks about to walk through the process. I'm going to spend much more of my time on the very first one because that's the one that most of us will use to get to that point. It's the approach that I have used, and it's just the easiest to work through. So that very first way is what he calls the second intention. It's the mastery of awareness. And basically what that means is that we're an adult now, and as we go through life, we get to choose what we believe. I want you to really let that sink in. As an adult, you get to choose what you believe. So the first time that you made up your agreements and your beliefs, especially as a child, you really didn't have that option. Your goal was survival, so you believed everything that everybody was saying. Now this time around, as an adult, you can stop and ask yourself, what do I believe? And if you don't believe what you were raised to believe, you can change it. That is what personal freedom is. That is what living the Four Agreements is all about. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy, but that's kind of the whole goal and purpose here. And I will say, just personal experience here, it is hard. It gets easier. He even talks about that every time you change an agreement. You gain more of your own personal power back, which means going through the rest is easier, but it does take work. It takes attention, which is one of the reasons this is called mastery of attention. It is really about awareness and being thoughtful of what's going on in your head. So really the basic gist of it is you pay attention. You identify a belief that isn't healthy for you or isn't authentically you. You decide what you want it to be, and then you replace it. He talks very much about you have to replace it with something. And it's the same with a habit. If you're changing a habit, you can't just eliminate the habit. You've got to put something in its place. So now I want to share with you a couple of tips on how I did this, and I think they're really beneficial ways to move forward quicker through this process. So the first is when I did identify a belief that I wanted to shift, I really did a lot of journaling on understanding where it came from so that I could kind of rewrite it. The more you understand about it, the easier it is to rewrite. Then what I did is I used tapping, or emotional freedom technique, because that entire process is based on acknowledging an old belief, rewriting it, and then moving forward. So in and of itself, the process does exactly what he's talking about. So how might you actually identify what you need to change? Well, I think it was in the first chapter, we actually talked about having your own little book of law where you start to write down all the agreements that you have that you do want to change. So having that really helps. And the way that you build that out is each time your mind starts chattering to you, write down what it's saying. You might not be able to get to it right away, but having it written down really helps you. In fact, just a couple months ago, I pulled out my little book of law that I created about 4 or 5 years ago and was flipping through it to find the issue that I was having, and I found it, right? It was there. I had noticed it years earlier, but didn't have the time to work on it, so I wrote it down and kept moving forward. So besides for the inner chatter, you can look at your fears. Most of our fears have some sort of limiting belief attached to them. Figuring out what those limiting beliefs are tied to that fear can help you identify the agreement that then needs to be reworked. Now, if you're not even sure how to do that, I actually have a course on how to overcome your fears that includes some journal prompts and everything. The link will be in the comment section below if you're interested in taking that. And then another great way to identify the agreements and limiting beliefs that need changed is look at the areas of your life that you have a continual problem. If you can never quite seem to get past a problem, it typically means that there is some sort of agreement there that needs to be changed. So looking at those and also looking at commonalities between multiple areas. I recently just had this issue. I thought I had completely rewritten an agreement in my relationship section and that I was good to go, and lo and behold, a few years later it has showed up in my work life. So I dug in again, went back to those beliefs, and what I found was there was actually something even further underneath that I hadn't uncovered the first time. So really looking at where are my continuous problems, where are they showing up in multiple areas of your life, will help you figure out which of those agreements you need to work on rewriting. Now, the second thing he talks about is the mastery of transformation, and this truly is about transforming how you react to everything. He really focuses on emotions in this section because emotions really do control how we react, how much energy we have, and how everything's going to get pulled together. And what we really want to do is transform our emotions to positive and healthy, take control of them so they're not dominating us. And he talks about the very first thing that you should do in order to address this is work on forgiveness. And forgiveness is truly healing, and really it will also, again, show you where you have limiting beliefs that you need to change. But not just forgiving other people, which you want to do, but forgiving yourself. Forgiveness is very healing. It releases all these emotions that you're holding on to and is a fabulous place to start. Now, I know that's much easier said than done. I do have an article on my website about how to forgive, and I am working on a course on self-forgiveness and how you tie all of this together. Not quite done with that, but stay tuned. Click subscribe if you want to know when that is out. But I'll put a link to the article on how to forgive so you can get started with that. Now, one final thing I want to say about controlling our emotions, and this is a caution. I want you to be very careful that you don't take controlling your emotions as you need to shove them down. You do not want to ignore your emotions. You do not want to push your feelings aside. This is more about allowing them to be, but not control you. So what does this look like? I am going to use an example that I use quite frequently, but it's with my teenage son. And what I do when he does something wrong or upsets me or angers me. And basically what I do is when I have that emotion, I first acknowledge that it's there. And then oftentimes we'll say to him, okay, you did this wrong. I need to come up with some sort of consequence. But I'm really angry right now. I am going to go meditate. And I will do just that. And sometimes it won't be as nicely said as that. Sometimes it will be, I'll look at him and I will smile and go, I'm going to go meditate. he knows what that means now. But what I do there is I buy myself time to go acknowledge my emotion, get control over my emotion, figure out why I'm feeling that, and then really approach it from a place of unconditional love and understanding instead of emotionally reacting. Now, the final one that he talks about is the initiation of death. And we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but the basic concept is that you release all connection to this world. You live as if today is going to be your last day. This is easiest done if you have a near life or death experience. But I'm not going to talk a lot about it because I think the other ways are more practical for most of us. And I even know people who have had these life or death experiences that over time lose the impact of those if they're not doing the other stuff that he's talking about. And so while this absolutely is a way, as he straight up says, this is the hardest way, you might not want to go down there, it's much easier to really pay attention, be aware, and work on transforming your emotions, and you will get there probably faster than trying to focus on this last one. Now, chapter 7, I actually really enjoy chapter 7. It's just kind of like an uplifting, motivational chapter. And really here he's talking about living the dream, and he walks you through using your imagination to imagine what it would be like if you do achieve all this stuff that we've been talking about. And honestly, there's not much more that I can add to this chapter except for 2 pieces of advice. The first is when you are really struggling and you're like, why am I doing this? And you're ready to toss it to the side and just go back to your old ways, come to this chapter and really imagine everything that he's saying. Read it and stop, close your eyes and imagine what he's talking about. It really can be powerful to put that imagination into effect to keep you going. Now, the second thing that I want to say about this chapter actually is probably more of a summary of the whole book and why you should want to do this. And it also ties into the way that I teach. So I do teach spiritual growth, but here's the thing, and this is what you really should take away from this book, is in order to grow spiritually, you first have to deal with that emotional stuff. Emotional healing will allow you to move forward. It will give you self-confidence. It will get you self-love. You can't get self-love and spiritual growth and all those things that you want without doing the dirty work. That's just the way it works. And if you approach this from a perspective of, we're going to brush over the top, we're going to bypass the hard stuff, and, I'm just going to sit and meditate and everything's going to be great, that's not actually growth. That's not getting you closer to God. That's not getting you closer to your higher source. What it is authentically doing this work. Work on your emotional healing, rewrite those limiting beliefs. That will lead you to more self-love. More self-love gets you to a point where you're more compassionate, more understanding with everybody else. And that eventually slowly grows into a deeper spiritual understanding. So really look at this book as how to grow spiritually by doing the work. Okay, so that's it. We've covered the whole book. I hope you enjoyed it. If you still have questions, drop them in the comments below. The playlist will be here, so you can come back, revisit it time and time again. Now, if you are really struggling with it, I'm going to share a couple of tips with you on how I worked through it. So when I really first started working through it, like really started digging into it, not just reading it and then tossing it aside, I did 2 things. One, I used the companion book. Now, this is not completely necessary, but I will say it was very, very beneficial when I was first starting out and was very confused. It really has some great tips. It has some journal prompts. It is worth the purchase. And the second thing that I did was I was actually working with a coach at that time who understood the 4 agreements. In fact, she was the reason I had read it and was implementing it. And so having her who had already been working on it was really, really beneficial because sometimes I would just glitch and get into my head. Now, if you aren't working with a coach or don't have the money to work with a coach, you can also do this with friends. So I had my son read the 4 agreements, and now quite frequently we will catch each other when we're slipping up. So are you making an assumption there? Are you doing your best? And it really helps to surround yourself with people who will support you in the endeavor. Now, don't give up. Keep working on it. Yes, it's hard, but trust me, it is really worth it. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, click like, and if you subscribe to my channel, I cover emotional healing and spiritual growth. I share meditations and a whole bunch of other fun stuff. I hope you hang out with me, and I will see you in the next video.